What were the causes of World War II? What caused the tensions that arose after the First World War to intensify rather than be resolved? How did the Treaty of Versailles influence the German perception of justice and their desire for revenge? What role did the totalitarian regimes that emerged in Europe during the 1920s and 1930s play? Why did figures like Adolf H. and Mussolini believe that territorial expansion was key to the survival of their nations? Did the League of Nations fail in its mission to preserve world peace? What limitations prevented you from acting in the face of aggression from Japan, Italy, and Germany? How did the appeasement policy pursued by the United Kingdom and France, instead of preventing a conflict, encourage Adolf H's expansionist actions? Finally, why was the invasion of Poland in 1939 the trigger that made war inevitable? Stay tuned to the end of the video to explore how these questions help us understand one of the most significant tragedies of the 20th century. Before we start, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to stay updated with our latest content. World War II was one of the most devastating events in history, and its causes are complex and varied. To understand them, it is important to know several key factors that caused them. The Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles, 1919, was a peace agreement that officially ended the First World War. However, instead of fostering a lasting peace, this treaty laid the groundwork for the resentment and conflict that would lead to World War II. The victorious powers, especially France and the United Kingdom, imposed extremely severe conditions on Germany. Among the treaty's harshest clauses was the requirement that Germany pay massive reparations, estimated at 132 billion gold marks, leaving the country in a deep economic crisis. This financial burden contributed to uncontrolled inflation in the 1920s and to the impoverishment of the population. In addition to economic reparations, Germany was forced to cede important territories, such as Alsace and Lorraine, to France and all its colonies. It also lost lands in the east to Poland, creating the Polish Corridor, which separated East Prussia from the rest of Germany, which generated further resentment among the Germans. In addition, the treaty required the demilitarization of the German army, limiting it to just 100,000 soldiers, and prohibited the possession of tanks, aircraft, and submarines, which left them in a vulnerable position. This set of measures was perceived by many Germans as a national humiliation. The War Guilt Clause, Article 231 of the treaty, blamed Germany exclusively for the conflict, which increased the feeling of injustice. In this context, Adolf H. and the N Party capitalized on widespread discontent, using the treaty as a symbol of the betrayal of the Allied powers and of the German politicians who signed the agreement, whom Adolf H. called the November criminals. The desire of many Germans for revenge and to restore national pride was a crucial factor facilitating Adolf H's rise to power. Adolf H. promised to reverse the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, recover lost territory, and rebuild Germany's military power, which proved key to his growing popularity in the 1930s. The rise of totalitarian regimes in Europe during the 1920s and 1930s was a phenomenon that radically transformed world politics and created the conditions for the Second World War. These regimes, which emerged in response to political instability, economic crisis, and resentment over the outcome of World War I, were characterized by strong state control, the elimination of political opposition, and the promotion of extremist ideologies. The rise of totalitarian regimes. Italy began World War I as a member of the Triple Alliance, a coalition formed with Germany and Austria-Hungary. However, when war broke out in 1914, Italy chose to remain neutral, arguing that the Triple Alliance was defensive in nature, and Austria-Hungary had been the aggressor by initiating the conflict with Serbia. In 1915, Italy changed sides and joined the Allies, United Kingdom, France, Russia, signing the Treaty of London. In exchange for its entry into the war, the Allies promised Italy Austrian territories such as Trentino, South Tyrol, and Dalmatia, which Italy wished to annex in order to expand its territory and complete its unification. Despite high expectations, Italy's participation in the war proved extremely costly, both in terms of lives and resources, and victory did not provide all of the promised territories, fueling national frustration and resentment against its former allies. The rise of fascism in Italy. Fascism arose in Italy largely as a response to the economic, social, and political difficulties that followed the First World War. The main causes of the rise of fascism were post-war discontent. Despite being on the winning side of World War I, Italy did not receive all of the territories promised in the Treaty of London, which became known as the Mutilated Victory. This generated deep resentment among the population and political elites. Economic crisis. After the war, Italy faced a serious economic crisis. Inflation, unemployment, and social unrest spread throughout the country, especially affecting war veterans and the working class. Political instability. Post-war Italian democracy was weak and fragmented. Governments changed frequently and failed to solve economic problems or stem the growing threat of socialist and communist movements. The fear of a communist revolution similar to that of Russia led conservative and elite sectors to look for a strong figure who could put a stop to these movements. Benito Mussolini and fascism. Taking advantage of the chaos, Benito Mussolini founded the Fasci di Combattimento in 1919, a movement that combined extreme nationalism, militarism, and the promise of restoring order. Mussolini promised to end internal fighting, revive the economy, and restore Italy's prestige. With the support of the middle classes, the Catholic Church, and sections of the elite, Mussolini's fascists seized power in 1922 with the March on Rome, marking the beginning of the fascist dictatorship. Mussolini promoted a vision of an authoritarian and expansionist state, based on the idea of restoring the greatness of the ancient Roman Empire. Fascism advocated the supremacy of the state over the individual, extreme nationalism, and the militarization of society. Mussolini justified territorial expansion as a necessity to strengthen Italy and consolidate his power. Thus, Italy invaded Ethiopia in 1935, demonstrating its expansionist ambition and its challenge to the international community. The rise of N in Germany. In Germany, N under Adolf H, who came to power in 1933, was even more radical. Adolf H exploited popular resentment towards the Treaty of Versailles and the severe economic crisis that had plunged the country into unemployment and poverty. One of his key promises was to annul the treaty, which entailed rebuilding a powerful army and recovering lost territories. Furthermore, Adolf H advocated the need for living space, Lebensraum, for the German people, which meant expansion to the east, especially to the detriment of Poland and the Soviet Union. N ideology was based on racism and anti-Semitism, and promoted the idea of the superiority of the Aryan race, which it identified with the authentic Germans, which justified the oppression and elimination of those they considered inferior. These totalitarian regimes not only established internal dictatorships, but also promoted aggressive policies of territorial expansion and militarization, challenging the international order established after the First World War. Fascism in Italy and N in Germany shared the belief that only through force and conquest could their nations regain their greatness and ensure their survival, which led to military aggression and ultimately to World War II. Japan during World War I. Japan was on the side of the Allies during World War I. When war broke out in 1914, Japan decided to enter the conflict, partly because of its alliance with Great Britain. The Anglo-Japanese Treaty of 1902 obliged Japan to support Great Britain in the event of war, especially in the Pacific and East Asia. Japan took this opportunity to expand its influence in the Pacific, capturing German territories such as the Mariana, Caroline, and Marshall Islands, as well as the German port city of Tsingtao in China. In this way, Japan consolidated its position as an emerging power in Asia. Reasons for joining Germany and Italy in World War II. In World War II, Japan changed sides and joined the Axis powers, namely Germany and Italy. The reasons for this change were mainly strategic. Territorial expansion and resources. Japan, like Germany and Italy, pursued an expansionist policy. By the 1930s, Japan had begun to expand into Asia, invading Manchuria in 1931 and the rest of China in 1937. However, Japan needed more natural resources, especially oil and rubber, to fuel its economy and war machine. The European colonies in Southeast Asia were rich in these resources. Rivalry with the West. Japan felt marginalized by Western powers, especially after World War I, when it did not get all the territorial concessions it had hoped for in Asia. Growing tension with the United States and the United Kingdom, which opposed Japanese expansion, led Japan to seek alliances with Germany and Italy, who were also challenging the international order imposed by the Western powers. Tripartite Pact 1940. In 1940, Japan signed the Tripartite Pact with Germany and Italy, formalizing the Axis alliance. The agreement stipulated that if any of the nations was attacked by a power not already involved in the war, such as the United States, the other Axis nations would join in its defense. This alliance was essentially a measure against the influence of the United States and Great Britain in the Pacific and Europe. Germany's territorial expansion. When Adolf H came to power in 1933, he quickly implemented his plans for territorial expansion, based on the ideology of Lebensraum, which justified the need to obtain more living space for the German people. One of its first expansionist actions was in 1936, when it remilitarized the Rhineland region, in violation of the Treaty of Versailles. Despite this, European powers such as France and the United Kingdom did not intervene directly, which strengthened Adolf H's perception that he could continue with his plans unopposed. In 1938, Adolf H carried out the annexation of Austria, known as the Anschluss, without significant resistance, achieving the union of the two countries under the Third Reich. That same year, he demanded the incorporation of the Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia with a large population of German origin. This led to the Munich Conference, where the leaders of France and Britain, under a policy of appeasement, gave in to Adolf H's demands in an attempt to avoid a new war. Although they thought they were securing peace, they were actually only strengthening Adolf H's confidence that he could continue his expansion without consequences. In 1939, Germany invaded the rest of Czechoslovakia, breaking the promises made at Munich and proving that concessions had only fueled its ambitions. Later that year, Adolf H signed a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, giving him the freedom to attack Poland without fear of conflict with the USSR. On September 1, 1939, Germany's invasion of Poland was the trigger for World War II, as both France and the United Kingdom declared war on Germany, ending the policy of appeasement. The invasion of Poland, 1939. The invasion of Poland by Germany on September 1, 1939 marked the formal beginning of the Second World War. This attack was the outcome of expansionist policies and the signing of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression agreement between Germany and the Soviet Union. This pact contained a secret clause in which both powers agreed to divide Polish territory. The German attack was carried out using the military tactic of blitzkrieg, or lightning war, which combined the massive use of tanks and aircraft for a rapid and devastating invasion. Poland, surprised and militarily outnumbered, was unable to defend itself effectively. By September 17, 1939, Soviet forces invaded eastern Poland, fulfilling their part of the deal. Meanwhile, the Western powers, especially Britain and France, which had guaranteed Poland's security, declared war on Germany 2 days later on September 3rd. Despite this declaration, they did not immediately launch a direct military intervention, giving Germany time to consolidate its control over Poland. The occupation was brutal for the Poles. The country was divided between Germany and the Soviet Union, with serious consequences for the civilian population, including mass executions, forced displacement, and the establishment of ghettos. The invasion of Poland not only sparked global conflict, but also revealed the totalitarian expansionist intentions of both powers, laying the groundwork for the devastation that would follow in the years to come. The League of Nations. The failure of the League of Nations was one of the key factors contributing to the outbreak of World War II. This international organization, created in 1919 after the First World War under the Treaty of Versailles, had as its main objective to guarantee peace and avoid new conflicts through diplomacy and cooperation between nations. However, the League of Nations lacked real power to enforce its decisions, making it a weak body in the face of rising international tensions. One of the League's main problems was the lack of participation by major powers. The United States, although one of the architects of the organization under President Woodrow Wilson, never joined because of opposition in its own Senate. Furthermore, countries such as Germany and Japan withdrew from the League during the 1930s when their expansionist interests clashed with the organization's principles. The ineffectiveness of the League of Nations was demonstrated in several key events. For example, in 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria, and although the League condemned the aggression, it was unable to take effective measures to stop Japan. Similarly, in 1935, when Italy invaded Ethiopia, the League attempted to impose economic sanctions, but these were insufficient and poorly implemented, allowing Italy to continue its invasion without further repercussions. Finally, when Germany began its process of territorial expansion under Adolf H., the League of Nations was unable to stop the occupation of the Rhineland, the annexation of Austria, and the subsequent invasion of Czechoslovakia. In short, the League of Nations' inability to enforce its own resolutions and its lack of effective coercive mechanisms undermined its authority. This allowed totalitarian regimes in Europe and Asia to expand their power without fear of significant international repercussions, paving the way for global war. Sun Tzu and the concept of the Golden Bridge. The concept of the Golden Bridge in Sun Tzu's The Art of War refers to the strategy of offering an enemy a dignified and accessible way out to prevent him from fighting to the end. Sun Tzu recommends building a golden bridge that allows enemy troops to retreat without being cornered, thereby reducing the risk that they will fight more fiercely and resist out of desperation. The main idea is that when an enemy has no escape route, it tends to fight harder for survival, which can result in a more costly and prolonged battle. On the other hand, if the enemy perceives an option to retreat, he is likely to take that opportunity, and the conflict will be resolved with fewer losses for both sides. Not only does this approach make for an easier victory, it can also reduce future hostility and prevent unnecessary destruction. This principle has been adapted in multiple strategic contexts, where an organized withdrawal may be more advantageous than a direct and definitive confrontation. Ignoring Sun Tzu's teaching of the Golden Bridge often leads to serious consequences, such as creating desperate and resentful enemies who may seek revenge in the future. This lack of a dignified way out can incite resistance or revenge, often with greater intensity. The Treaty of Versailles is a clear example of how failure to apply this lesson can have far-reaching adverse effects. Instead of offering Germany peace terms that would allow it to rebuild with dignity, harsh economic sanctions, the reduction of its army and the loss of territory generated deep resentment in German society. This discontent fueled the desire for revenge and facilitated the acceptance of radical leaders such as Adolf H., who promised to annul the treaty and restore national pride. Had the Golden Bridge concept been applied, offering a less humiliating way out, Germany might not have felt the need to return to war to regain its position in Europe. Moreover, the resentment caused by the treaty not only affected Germany, but also strengthened fascism in Italy and militarism in Japan, who saw in the alliance with Germany an opportunity to challenge the order established by the Allied powers. A less punitive approach to peace, one that recognized the complexities of these nations' defeats, might have changed the course of history, preventing World War II or at least reducing the scale of the conflict. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you want us to cover a specific topic, please write it in the comments. Give this video a like and share it so your family and friends can also learn about the true causes of World War II. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. And don't miss our recommended video at the end. You will enjoy it. Never forget, history is the imitator of time, the repository of actions, the witness of the past, the example and warning of the present, the caution for the future.